Hello and welcome to Thursday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, where today we're going to take a look at a hybrid puzzle. It's a hybrid of Sandwich Sudoku, which we looked at yesterday, and Clone Sudoku. And this puzzle's been sent in by Marijn Velde. Marijn, I hope I've said your name correctly, who is only 16 years old, so yet another young viewer of the channel producing puzzles that are apparently extremely high quality. This one's been recommended to me twice and has a very high rating on Logic Masters Germany, so I think this should be an absolute treat. Now, during these days of self-isolation, I hope you're all managing to stay safe. We are going to try and keep up our schedule of 2 videos a day. Mark has done a video of a classic Sudoku, which will appear later on tonight, and I've watched that video already, and it's really cool. There are a couple of very interesting tricks in it. So if you're a fan of sort of complex ideas in classic Sudoku, definitely check out that video later on. What else to mention? Well, we've got a few exciting things coming up on the channel. I am going to record a solve of Ken Endo's incredible castle wall puzzle. Not a live solve, I hasten to add. This is a puzzle I have struggled over in private, but I do want to show you a logical solution to that because it is such a beautiful, beautiful puzzle. And also I'll have the notes of Takuma Kitamura, who has sent me his thought processes from the Japanese Heads-Up Puzzle Championship. So we're going to be able to look at his solve and know what he was thinking. He did the puzzle in less than 7 minutes, which I have to tell you, once I now understand the logic of how to do that puzzle, I consider a feat of utter genius. So look out for that. We were also sent a video by none other than Kurt Hugo Schneider. He sent us a video about some star battle ideas, which are fascinating. So I'm going to record a video in which I feature bits of Kurt's video. So look out for that if you're a fan of Kurt, which I suspect most of you are. And I'm also just trying to source from Japan a good star battle puzzle to go along with that video, and I think we've got a very good candidate. Ryotaro Chiba has helped me out there. So yeah, that should be another great video to come. We've also got prizes coming up on the channel, all sorts of things. It's exciting times. But how does this puzzle work? Well, you can see we've got some clues outside the grid. These are standard Sandwich Sudoku clues. I say standard Sandwich Sudoku clues in case you watched yesterday's video, which had some unusual sandwich clues to go along with the normal ones. But what is a normal Sandwich Sudoku clue? Well, let's look at the 7 in this column. That means that the cells sandwiched between the 1 and the 9 in this column have to sum up to 7. So if we had a 9 here and a 1 here, these 2 squares would have to sum up to 7. That's what this clue is telling us. Now you can see that we've got some 0 clues on the left-hand side. Now that means there can be no cells sandwiched between the 1 and the 9, because the sum of the cells sandwiched between the 1 and the 9 have to total 0, i.e. 9 and the 1 are adjacent. And we've got some quite big totals as well. So that will mean the 1 and the 9 have to be quite far apart in this column here and this row. Now we've also got 2 key shapes in the grid. Now these are clones of each other. Now what does that mean? That means that if we manage to place this digit, let's imagine we worked out that digit was a 1, then on the clone, in exactly the same position, so we sort of have to rotate it round, this square would be the equivalent of this square on the clone. This square would also have to be a 1. So these clones have to map to each other exactly after the rotation. So this square is obviously the equivalent of that square on the clone. So those 2 squares would have to be the same digit, whatever that digit happened to be. So there are 2 sort of nice constraints operating in tandem on this grid. Now I'm going to have a go and try and solve it for you now. If you want to have a go, and I definitely recommend it, just click on the link under the video and it will take you to this web page where, on whichever device takes your fancy, you should be able to play the puzzle. And with that, let's get cracking. Now, well, we've got 1, 9 and 1, 1 in the grid. Often with a Sandwich Sudoku, this is the place to start. And we can do some thinking about this column. We've got a 27 total, so the 9 has to be a long way away from the 1. In fact, it has to be at least 5 cells away. Now how do I know that? Well, that's because if I try a 4-cell sandwich, let's try the 9 there, what's the maximum I can make these yellow cells? Well, it would be 8 plus 7 plus 6 plus 5, and that adds to 26. So that is not enough. The 9 can't go there. The 9 has to be in one of these 2 squares, therefore, because of the 9 here. And the fact that if the 9 was there, the total would have to be 35 in the column, because we know that every row, column and box in a Sudoku adds up to 45, because that's what you get if you add up the numbers from 1 to 9. Now, actually, we can disambiguate which of these 9s is correct, and we can do that using some arithmetic. So if this was the 9, let's think about what that would mean. It would mean that these cells have to sum up to 27. So in this total, column total, we'd have 27 from the yellow cells, plus 1, that's 28, plus 9, that's 37. Now if I know the total for the column is 45, that cell has to be an 8, and that is not going to work. That's going to repeat the 8. So actually, we know this is not the 9. The 9 must be here. These 2 squares have to sum up to 8 without using a 1. So this is either 2 and 6 or 3 and 5, but we don't know which is which yet. But we have a 9 on the clone, look, so that means that this cell, which is the equivalent, must be a 9. Which means what? Well, that means there's a 9 in one of these 3 squares, but 2 of these are on the clone, so let's just try and work out which way round is that. That's the top of the clone, so that's the equivalent of these 2 squares, isn't it? Is that right? Getting confused in my brain. No, yes, it is. Ah, but that one there is the equivalent of that one. That can't be a 9. Let's look at that for a second. If that's a 9, we've got a 0 total in this row. So I have to put the 1 either here, which I can't, or here, which is going to repeat the 9 in the column. So that's not a 9. One of these 2 squares is a 9. And if this was on the clone, it would be the equivalent of that square. And that would be a 9. So we get... That might be possible. I can't see... I mean, the 1 would have to go there, I guess. But that looks possible as well. Bother. Okay. Hang on, let me just stare at this for a moment and see what else we can see. 7 total in column 5 and a 9 here means that the 1 in this column, it could be here if this was a 7, or it could be here, and these 2 cells would have to add up to 7, but it couldn't be here. And it can't be here because to make 3 cells add up to 7 in the sandwich, we would have to use a 1 again. We'd have to use 1, 2 and 4, and that would repeat the 1 in the column. So the 1 is in one of those 2 squares. Actually, and with this 0, look, that looks quite likely, doesn't it? Those 2 are probably 1 and 9, but we won't assume that's the case. We will try and prove it logically. So 10 clue. Yes, we can do something with this 10 clue. Because where can the 9 go? Yeah, the 9 is forced, actually. Where can the 9 go in this row? Now, if we try and put... Oh, there's a 9 up there as well, which makes it even clearer. But, you know, if the 9 is to the right of the 1, a 10 sum must be at least 2 cells. So 1, 2... We can't have the 9 in either of those squares. So obviously we can't have the 9 here. We can't have the 9 here. So the 9 could go there. But 4 cells then would have to add up to 10, which is absolutely impossible, especially as there's already a 6 in there. So the 9 must be this side, and it can't be in either of those 2 squares, so it must be here. Now that means one of those 2 squares is a 9, and this is on the clone and is the equivalent of that square. So No, I can't see why that couldn't be a 9. These two squares have got to sum up to 10 without using 4, 6 or 1, 9. So this is 2, 8 or 3, 7. Oh, now look, we've got a 0 clue here and we've locked the 9 into one of those squares. So, yes, this is great. So the 1 obviously can't go here because of this one. So the 1 is in this box. So the 1 must be in the middle because it's got to be next to a 9. If the 9 is here, the 1 will be here. If the 9 is here, the 1 will be here. So the 1 is here, which means one of these squares is a 1, and that's on the clone again. So that's the equivalent of these 3 squares. That square locks out that one. So the 1 is in one of those two, the equivalent of which is these 2 cells. It's a beautiful construction so far. I love the idea of this flipping of the key. Now, what do we do next? We've got a 0 total here. So, sorry about this. Let me just stare at this for a moment and try and work out what's going on. Sixteen must be at least a 3-cell sum. So 1, 2, 3 could not be a 1. This can't be a 1. So the 1 would be, if the 1 was this far away, that's too far away because these 2 cells would be outside the sum but would have to sum up to 19. That's no way possible. So the 1 is in one of those 2 squares in column 1. Now that's useful. This can't be a 9. Now why do I think this can't be a 9? Well, it's because if this is a 9, its friend on the clone is this square. So this would have to be a 9. Now that is a massive problem because now, because of this 0 clue, I have to put a 1 either here, which it can't, we just penciled these 1s in, or here, and it can't be there either. So this is not the 9, the 9 is here, which isn't massively surprising because of this 0 clue and our suspicion that this is a 1, but it's still another digit, which we will take. I mean, it is possible this could be the 1, and then that would be a 1, I suppose. And then that would be a 1. This would be a 1 over here. .28 clue here, so the 1 and the 9 have to be, you know, at this either end of this. But this 1 is interesting, isn't it? Because that rules out a 1 all the way along the spine of the key. So none of those squares can be a 1. In fact, we've got 4s interacting on the spine of the key as well. Well, in fact, 4 can't go in any of those squares. Sorry, I'm sort of thinking as I'm speaking here, but this 4 rules out all of those squares from being a 4, and this 4 rules out that one. So the 4 must be in one of those squares, and the 1, this can't be a 1. This can't be a 1 because if this is a 1, this 28 clue would force the 9 to go there. We need at least 5 cells to make up 28, so the 9 would have to go here where it would clash. So there is a 1-4 pair, I think, in this row. That is amazing. Now, Oh, this is beautiful as well. Now we can do some logic with this and the 28 sum, because the 4 has to be outside the sandwich now. Just to make it clear, let's just imagine that's the 1 and that's the 4. You can see the 9 has to be this side of this 4. Therefore, the 4 is outside the sum. So wherever we put the 9, let's say it's here, we'd have 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 28, those squares, is 38. So these two squares would have to sum up to 7. So they have to be 4 and 3. So there has to be a 3 next to the 4 outside the sandwich here. So the 9 must be here or here. And it can't be here because that's on the clone, and that is the equivalent of that square. And that 9 rules that square out from being a 9. So this can't be a 9. The 9, I think, has to be here. Which means this is the 1, this is a 4, and this is a 3. Good grief. Now this is a 9 from just Sudoku. This 3 is on the clone and is the equivalent of that square. That's a 3. One here. That's not 1 anymore. Oh, but now the 16 clue might be helpful, because these 3 squares have got to sum up to 19. Just to go through that, we've got 1 plus 9 is 10, plus the sandwich is 16, so that's 26 for those 6 cells. So these must add up to 19 to make 45 for the column. We have a 9 here, so these two have to add up to 14 without using a 5, so they are 6 and 8. This 3 impacts the 10 clue. This is now a 2-8 sum, because it can't be 3-7, it can't be 4-6, it can't be 1-9. And these remaining cells here are 2, 4 and 7. Now 2 of these are on, that can't be a 4. So this is 2 or 7, and it's the equivalent of the bottom of the key, which is that one. So that's a 2 or a 7. This one is, this one can't be a 4 either. So that one can't be a 4. So that's not a 4. So this one has to be a 4. And this is a 2-7 pair over here. Oh, no, whoopsie. That's a 2-7 pair in there. To be the equivalent of the 2-7 pair over on this side. Now, can we disambiguate this 2-7? Yes, we can, because we've got 2 and 8 here. So that's a 7. That's a 2. So the bottom of the key is a 7. The top of the key is a 2. So now we've got 2's here and here. So there's a 2 in one of those 3 squares. Now, let's check. Yeah, this square can't be a 2, so that square can't be a 2 because of a 2-8 in the box. So the 2's in one of those squares, and the equivalent of those squares is those squares. Now that is rather nice, isn't it? Look at that. So the 2's now align in columns 4 and column 5. So what do we do when we get this pattern in boxes where we lock 2's into the same columns or rows? Well, we ask the question, look at the open column here, column 6, and ask where the 2 can go. Can't go in those squares, can't go in those squares, so it must be in one of these 3 squares. Now that one is the equivalent of that one. So that can't be a 2, so this is not a 2. So we lock a 2 into just 2 positions now. How good is this puzzle though? This sort of intricacy coming from the rotation of the keys. It's just gorgeous. And the 27 clue is now forced. It is forced as well, because now in this column these 2 squares have got to add up to 8, They can't be 1 and 7, and they can't be 2 and 6. So these are 3 and 5, and there's a 5 there. 5 here, 3 here. So now there's a 5 over here. Let's check whether this one can be a 5. It can be, I think. These squares, looking at the box, have to be 1, 5 and 6 in some order. Now, that can't be a 1 because we've penciled the 1s into these squares. So let's just try and do the cloning here. So that's these 3 squares have got to be 1, 5 and 6. That one can't be a 5 because of the 5 in the box. Therefore, that one can't be a 5. That one can't be a 6. There's a 6 in the column. So this one can't be a 6. So there's a 6 in one of those 2 squares and a 6 in one of these 2 squares. We've got 6s here, 6s here. So there's a 6 in one of these 3 positions. Now, yes, this is lovely. Oh my, this is really lovely. Look at this. The 6 is in one of those squares. One of these 3 squares. But the clone equivalents of this square and this square are both in column 7. This square's equivalent is here. This 6 rules it out. This 6's equivalent is here, and this 6 rules it out. That is gorgeous. So the 6 is locked into this square. Holy moly. Now the 6 is in one of those 2 squares, which means we get a 6 in one of these 3 positions, a bit like the 2s. Now, can we rule 6 out from any of these positions? The equivalent, that square is a 5 or a 6. That can't be a 1. That's the equivalent of this square, that's why. So a 6 in one of these 2 squares is saying there's a 6 in one of these 2 squares, which looks, that does look possible. Or if it's not possible, I'm not seeing quite why it's not possible. Okay, so we've got to look for something else. So we've used the 27 clue. Oh, I've not looked at the 7 clue for a while. So if this was 2, this would be 5, this would be 1. That looks possible. If this is a single digit clue, this would be a 7 and this would be a 1. That also looks possible. Fours locked into those squares, look. Five, six. What am I meant to see next? Use this clue. This clue is still unresolved because I don't know where the 1 goes. This one is resolved. This one is resolved. That one's resolved. So it's either going to be the clone that I have to spot some stuff with. I suppose it could be Sudoku. Let's just have a quick stare at the grid. That square, look at that. That square, it can't be much. It can't be a 1, 2 or a 3, a 4, 5. And it can be a 6, but it can't be anything else. So that is a naked single. Sorry if that's been sitting there for ages. That means that's a 6. Now, does that matter? So in this row now, we need 1, 2, 7 and 9. That square's a 1 or a 2. Nine's here and here. Oh, and 9's here and here. Look, that's a 9. I should have spotted that before. That's a 9. Oh, goodness. 3 is forced down onto the clone there, look. which means 3 is in one of these two squares now. Now let's hope, can this be a 3? That is the equivalent of, oh yes it can be actually. This 3 is the equivalent of that square, so it's quite likely that's a 3, but this 3 is not possible because that is the equivalent of that square and that sees that 3. So this is not 3. This is 3, this is 3. Which means this is 3 by normal Sudoku. There's a 3, oops, a 3 in one of these two squares. That one can't be a 3 because of the 3 up here. And we've got 4, 5, 8 to place. This must be a 5 or an 8. That must be a 4 or a 5 because of the 8's penciled there. And that can be anything. Eights now. Look, we've got 8's. 8's are forced over into one of these 3 squares, therefore 8's are in one of these 2 squares down here. So if this is an 8, its equivalent is that square, which can be an 8. Bother. Oh, but look at this. Oh, this is so clever. This is so clever. This 5 is huge. Why? Because it rules a 5 out from that square. Now that square's equivalent on the clone is above the 9. So it's this square. So this 5 rules out 5 from those 2 squares and obviously these 2 squares. So the 5 in this box has to be down this side of the box. And that sees that square and forces it to be a 6. Now this is a 6. Oh, and this is going to be huge now. Now there must be a 6 in one of those squares. And I think this square is forced to be a 6. Which obviously that gives us a 1 and a 5 here. You can see that's the same up there. That looks like it's working, doesn't it? So we now have all sorts of things going on. Now we get 1's in one of those, oops, 1's in one of these 2 squares. 3's in one of these 2 squares as well. Well, this can't be a 1 because its equivalent square is that one, and there's a 1 there. So that must be the 3. Therefore, this is a 3. This is a 3. This must be a 1. This is a 1. So 1's in one of those 2 squares, and right, well the 1 can't be here because that's the equivalent of that square, which is this 1. Which means this is the 1, and now we can disambiguate the 7 clue. Holy moly. So this has to now be 2, 5. You can see the 2 can't go here. So that's 2, that's 5. That must be the 8. This is not... Oh, I didn't mean to do that, whatever I've just done. Whoops. Let's get rid of the 2 penciled there. Now, the equivalent of that square is this square. Now you can see, looking at this row, that has to be 4 or 7. It can't be 4. So that's a 7, that's a 7. That's a 7. So 7 in one of these 2 squares. These 2 squares are both on the clone, and we now know they are 5 and 8, and we know the order from the 5 down here. So 5, 8, which means 8 is above the 3, 5 is here. This 8 sees the 8, 2 at the bottom. I think we might be on the home stretch now. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous puzzle though. I mean, absolutely stunning. It'd be stunning if this had been set by, you know, an experienced, very, very high quality setter, let alone a 16-year-old. It's absolutely amazing. So these should be 4 and 6. That looks like it's working, doesn't it? Yeah. So we've done this clone, I've done that clone. I think I've used all the clues. That's got to be a 4 to complete the row. This should be an 8. That should be a 5. 4, 5 here, 4, 5 here. That 5 disambiguates the 5, 4 over on this side. That should make this a 2, I think. One of those squares, that's got to be an 8. It's got to be a 4. That's got to be an 8. That fixes the 8 and the 6, which fixes the 6 and the 4, look. Now that should be a 2. Those two squares there have got to be 4 and 7, which is resolvable. Fixes the 7 and the 2 there, and this should be a 2. Yes. Wow, that is so impressive, and a very, I mean, just a beautiful solve. The way that the logic interacted between the sandwich clues and the cloned keys was just so satisfying, you know. Makes you believe that there is order in the universe when you see things like this. Loved it. Hope you guys did too. Do let us know in the comments, and we'll be back later with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.